Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, your New York Giants are 2-8. They're on their bye week. We know that Daniel Jones is headed to the bench at this point, whether head coach Brian Daboll is willing to say it or not, whether GM Joe Shane is willing to say it or not. It will be pretty stunning if Jones is still the quarterback week 12 when the Giants face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at MetLife Stadium. And all of that means that it's time to begin discussing who's next after Daniel Jones. And we're not talking about Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito. We're talking about 2025. We're talking about the future at the position, which means we're talking about the 2025 NFL draft, and which means that of course it's time to talk to an old friend, a good friend of Big Blue View, and one of the best draft analysts that we know, and that of course is Emory Hunt of Football Game Plan and CBS Sports. And Em, it's been too long. Where you been? You've been hiding all season with the Giants. I haven't seen you at a game since training camp.
I know, man. It's with CBS Sports, they have me doing a lot of Sunday work in terms of like pregame, halftime, post game. So it's been busy, but I hadn't been able to check in on my people at MetLife.
Yeah, I know. You just said send me to good games. I know. You send me to MetLife, and there's no good football at MetLife. Whether the guys are wearing green or whether they're wearing white or blue or throwback jerseys from the 30s. There's no good football these days at MetLife. You want
But
to go somewhere else.
at least I'm sweating it out there with y'all in the spring and summer, though. At least I earn my stripes that way.
Yeah, but you always look cooler than the rest of us. No matter what, you always look cooler than the rest of us. Hey, let's talk about quarterback. And let me just start with this real quickly. I mean, I don't see any way at this point that the Giants can go any farther with Daniel Jones. I think they gave him this year. They wanted to give him that rope, but you agree that really at this point they're 2-8, 3-13 with him as the starter the last 2 years. They just can't go any farther.
Yeah, and you know me, Ed. I've held this position about Jones since they drafted him. And so with this particular year, and just to be fair and honest, I don't feel like Jones has played terribly bad. I actually think he's played decent ball. It's just that you see the limitations. So you see
Right.
the ceiling for him in terms of what they can potentially be offensively. Now they can move the ball within the 20 to 20 range, but inside the red zone, when things get tighter, when the anticipatory skills have to be ratcheted up, when you have to make tight window throws, that's all the things that he struggles with. And so that's why they struggle inside the red zone. They don't have an issue moving the ball. We've seen this time and time again. They can move the football. The run game has been better. They got good catch and run threats at receiver. They're utilizing all the weapons at receiver, aside from Hyatt. But the reason why you're not using Hyatt is because your quarterback can't push the ball vertically deep down the field. But in terms of him just playing the position, I mean, it's not like it's catastrophic. It's just that, man, he's limited. And I think that's
Exactly.
why you have to just look at it and say, okay, at least we know if he's going to be a backup, he can come in 2 or 3 games and help carry you over till your starter gets back. But expecting him to lift the umbrella off the offense, that's just not his game.
Right. And that's exactly really, when Joe Shane way back on Hard Knocks, when he said this is the year for Daniel, I said way back then, he wasn't saying, I know Daniel Jones is going to prove to be this great player. He was saying that he felt like they were putting enough around him finally to show whether his limitations were going to hold the offense back or whether they could win with what he was. And I think we're seeing clearly that Jones is holding them back. I looked at it and they're 2-8. And there are other things going on with the Giants. There are other issues. There's issues on the defensive side of the ball with run defense, and there have been special teams issues, and there have been some game day roster management issues that have been problematic. But I think they're 5-5 with better quarterback play. And if they're 5-5, not a soul is talking about Brian Daboll's job status or Joe Shane's job status. So I think it's clear that quarterback play, is in some respect holding this team back.
And Dayball has been calling a very good game. You know, he's getting the one-on-one opportunities for some of these playmakers. It's just that, when teams know you have a cap on your offense, you won't see a deep safety. You'll see a lot of flat line across the back end where they're not going to threaten us deep down the field. So we don't have to put our safeties that deep. We can essentially play cover four, keep everything in front of us, just rally up and make a tackle. And that's essentially what's been happening here. And so, I don't buy that Brian Daboll's job should be on the line. I think he's done well with what he has been able to work with. And
Right.
so that's why you got to give him a chance to get his quarterback and show you that he can build an explosive offense, because this offense is moving the ball. They just can't score.
Right. And before we actually get into the draft class, there were people that wanted to kill Daboll for calling that flea flicker on Sunday.
It was open.
Um, 3rd and 1. But look, Daboll has looked at Daniel Jones all year and said it, and he won't say it out loud, but he's calling quarterback sneaks on 2nd and 1 instead of taking a shot. He's calling quarterback sneaks on 3rd and 1 instead of taking a shot, because he knows that the best thing to do with this quarterback in this offense is just get the first down and move on. I will not kill him for taking that shot, even though it didn't work, because there were 2 guys wide open. And the reason that didn't work is, for some reason, Daniel Jones took like a month and a half to set his feet and get the ball in position to throw it. And by the time he did all of that, Jermaine Illuminor had been beaten, and he got sacked. So that play should have worked, with good quarterback play.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's part of the issue, the quickness of the decision and the quickness of his processing and the quickness of his game.
Right.
He's playing as if it's 1996 and the game is so much faster. Like the guys on defense are just as fast as your running backs and some of the receivers. So you
Right.
gotta your process has to be quicker, from the
Right.
setup, from the throwing. Everything has to be quicker nowadays.
Right. So let's get into the 2025 quarterback class. And we know that, on its face, everybody says, "Oh, it's not as good as the class the year before," and all of that. And I see you start to laugh there already, because I know that you're probably going to tell me that's not the case. But what I want to ask you first of all is, you always have one guy. I know you well enough to know you always have one guy. Back, a few years ago, you were pounding the table saying there's no way that Lamar Jackson should get out of the top 5, top 10, and he went 32 to Baltimore, and we've seen how that's worked out. There's always a guy that you're pounding the table for, saying this is my quarterback in this class. Uh, who's your guy in this class?
Shedeur Sanders, and it's been that way since he was a freshman at Jackson State. I'll walk you back to that initial thought, because I hadn't watched him play high school. I heard about the high school he played at, and I was like, he's probably just it's probably just a daddy ball situation. He's gonna start his son, and then the first game at Jackson State I'm watching, I'm like, wow, he's okay, he's getting the ball out. It's an efficient throw. He's making good decisions. All right, cool. By like week 3, I'm like, wow, this dude is playing like he's a senior. in terms of his decision making and how he's handling the pressure. And they go on and have a fantastic first year of him being the starting quarterback. I think he won Black College Player of the Year that year, or maybe the next year when he won that award. But both times SWAC champion, and got to the Celebration Bowl, the second year. And I was like, I said it in the tweets out there, so people can go find the tweets. I said, this kid is the Black Joe Burrow, based on how he plays. What you like about Burrow, you like about Shedeur. It just seemed to lock in when the moment calls for him to lock in. And if you think about this from this perspective, and I'm glad he said this at Big 12 Media Day when they asked him uh, this year, who do you compare your game to? First name he said was Joe Burrow. So he sees it. And the cool part about what Shedeur has done and what he does is you can see how tough he is because he hadn't played behind the best offensive line at Colorado until this year. The offensive line is better this year, but we saw him get beat up last year. And at Jackson State, he had the better talent of maybe the conference, but even when they played out of conference, he was still, and where a team may have better talent, he was still rising to the occasion. Down, to distance to go. How many times we've seen so far here at Colorado that he's driven the team down 90 plus yard drives, like in backed up situations. And this is the ultimate, you know, notch in his belt is he's Deion Sanders' son. So imagine being Deion Sanders' son, playing quarterback and being the last son and having to be good, and dealing with the pressure of being all three and out there performing as if he hasn't, had any worry in the world. That's the kind of guy that you can see and say, you know what? This is a franchise quarterback. This is a person that can handle the rigors of the NFL regular season. This is a person that we've seen get knocked down, get right back up, and make plays. And then when you get to the physical skills, touch, timing, anticipation, accuracy, all of that is checking all those boxes. He's been trained by Tom Brady. And so when you watch Shedeur play, he's got good pocket mobility, gets the ball out on time when he's not holding and taking some of those sacks. That's an issue. That's a negative about his game. But for the most part, it's all positive. So Shedeur Sanders is the guy in this class. But there are two other ones, but
Let's table them for a second
right. So
because
I
I
would say
want
Shedeur is my number one, has been my number one
right.
for 3 years.
I have questions and concerns about Shedeur Sanders in relation to the New York Giants. And obviously the Giants have the number 2 pick, and if they sit at number 2, they're going to have the opportunity to get one of these guys if it's whoever they end up deciding that they want. And my concern with Shedeur Sanders is what comes with Shedeur Sanders.
What's that?
It's the prime time that comes with Shedeur Sanders. It's the father that has said, even in something that I read today, that he more or less wants to control where Shedeur Sanders winds up. And my concern is just the level of interference or distraction that you might get from Deion if you bring Shedeur Sanders in as your franchise quarterback, and whether you're willing or able to handle the fact that prime time is always going to be a figure that looms over your football team.
Sound like Eli Manning to me.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that, but it's an Eli Manning type situation. But did Archie Manning loom over the Giants when they took Eli?
We didn't have social media back then, and also I just feel like people are just making a mountain out of a molehill because that hadn't been the case for Shedeur at Jackson State, nor had it been the case for him at Colorado. Because at the end of the day, think about it: if Deion was doing that, that would mean Shedeur ain't playing well, because he would have to overly justify his son getting drafted. You don't see him doing this about Shiloh, or you didn't see him do it about Deion Sanders Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
who was a receiver slash punt returner at SMU. Like, there's a reason why he's saying this, because he understands what we're seeing right now in the pro game. We know situations matter, um, and we're seeing it play out in with guys that are now reclamation projects, like your Malik Willis's, your Zach Wilson. This preseason, he looked great with the Broncos. You see Sam Darnold this year doing great things. But in terms of Shedeur, there's no issue between I think that's just Edge. You gotta log off social media, man, because people make too much of that. Because if it was, it would have affected his play at Colorado, and he may end up being a Heisman finalist
Mm-hmm.
when it's all said and done. So I have no. I think he's. Remember, I told you that the year we were talking. I think it was 2021 or Justin Fields' year and Zach Wilson year.
Okay.
That I would rather have Justin Fields come out to New York, whether it's the Giants or the Jets, because he can handle mentally this market. This is a situation where Shedeur can handle this market. Again, like I said, he was Deion's son before he was Shedeur Sanders' quarterback, and that's going to always be the case. So imagine having that burden of performing with your dad was one of the greatest football players ever, and you're playing one of the best positions in the best position in football. You better be good, and he's showing
Mm-hmm.
that he is.
Let me flip that question before we move on to the other guys. Um, Dion has said, we're talking about situations that he wants Shedeur in the right situation. That doesn't necessarily mean, that he wants him to land with the Kansas City Chiefs, or that he wants him to land with with the Steelers, or a program that's already built, that already has, the established veteran winning coach. Do you look at the Giants as a situation that would be good for Shedeur Sanders, that the family might feel good about, with Brian Daboll, with Malik Neighbors, with some of the pieces that they've got in place, Tyrone Tracy looking like a player? Do you look at New York and the Giants as a place where they would be fine with him landing?
I believe so, because of a lot of what you talked about. You have a number one wide receiver in place. You have some good pieces offensively in place with Wandale Robinson. You talked about Tyrone Tracy, Theo Johnson. We hadn't really seen Shedeur have that tight end to like other college quarterbacks tend to have. They don't really use the tight end, so that'll be a new thing for him. We got some good pieces when they're healthy along the offensive line. Any pro offensive line is going to be better than what he played with in college. And if Brian Daboll is here, at least he could point to Brian Daboll's work with Josh Allen and work with other quarterbacks at the collegiate level and say, hey, yeah, this guy knows offense. And then if you just look at it, zoom out and just look at it from an offensive standpoint, how the Giants, run their offense, it's kind of like, this could work for him in how they want to play.
Interesting. So, as we're doing this, it's Wednesday afternoon as you and I record. This morning at Big Blue View, our draft guy, Chris Flum, our primary draft guy, did really a bye-week mock draft, and he has the Giants taking Cam Ward at number 2 over Shedeur. And Chris, and everybody sees things differently, and I love that. Guys, you put your marker down and you say, this is my guy. Cam Ward is Chris's guy. Cam Ward is his QB1. Um, just your thoughts on Cam Ward, and what you think his future, his ceiling is, and maybe is there a longer learning curve for him, maybe just based on experience?
My top three quarterbacks are Shedeur, Cam, and Jayden Milroe. And so Cam, I've interviewed him for my show back in 2021 when he was at Incarnate Word. So I've known Cam since then. And
Hmm.
been and it's again, the tweets are out there, folks. I've been telling people about Cam Ward since he was an FCS quarterback and nobody took me seriously. So now, you look at what he's done. He is someone that's he's a cross between, Tyrod, and also plays the game kind of like Steve McNair too. Just where if you tune into any one of his games, no matter what school, you don't know if they're up 20 or down 20 because he's kind of even killed all the way through, and he's locked in. He is someone that's going to find a way to make a play. Where he differs from Shedeur is he's a little bit more athletic, a little bit more twitchy in terms of like, being able to escape and beat you on the ground with his legs too. He's a little bit bigger, thicker than Shedeur, but he has the same type of. He has a whip of an arm. Like his release is insane. So he's able to get the ball out quick and also drive it in tight windows. And he doesn't shy away from testing tight windows. So he has a little bit more of that arm arrogance that you talk about. And so if you're talking in terms of an RPO game or, just being able to operate off play action rather well and seeing the entire field in terms of keeping all options open, even those receivers that are not in the progression. And if he just buys enough time, he can make them part of the progression. That's what you're getting with Cam Ward. He's going to give you that, that above the X's and O's type deal that you get. Now, granted, there is some Brett Favre in him where, he may throw a back across his body and it may end up in an interception, but later in the game, he may throw back across his body to a guy that's wide open and to be a touchdown. So you just gotta, he's a playmaker. And he's also one that I would, if you told me you would rather Shedeur or Cam or the other guy we're going to talk about, Milroe, you won't see an argument from me because each one has a unique special trait that paired with Dayball makes a lot of sense.
So give me the case for Milroe paired with Dayball.
Explosiveness, Ed. Ed, you and I are old enough to have seen a lot of football, right? We didn't just start watching football in
We're
2000.
just old, Em. At least I'm just old. You're not old.
I'm
I'm
getting
old.
there.
I'm
and,
old.
and when you look at Milroe, I said this. I'm in studio last Saturday, and we're watching all the games, right? And so when he broke that 72-yard run against LSU, once he got, I would say, 2 yards past the D line, I was like, he's gone. And his level of turnover, acceleration, and explosiveness, Ed, is very reminiscent of Bo Jackson. When Bo Jackson took off, you didn't have to see like once let's say the run against Seattle where he turned the corner and ran out the stadium, right? When he turned the corner, you already knew he was off. There was a wrap. So that's Milroe. So Milroe gives you that particular element to where, the explosive run. And that's going to enhance Tyrone Tracy's ability to run the football with advantageous lanes. So now the Giants will go from a solid run team to a great run team. And keep this part in mind. Lamar Jackson paired with Derrick Henry. Everybody thought Derrick Henry was washed until he paired with Lamar Jackson. And now he's having people say he might be Offensive Player of the Year. It's because of the Lamar Jackson element that Derrick Henry is having that advantageous running lanes. That's what you get with a Milroe. Now, the passing part, and this is what I like most about what Milroe has done, because if you'd asked me about Jayden Milroe in 2022, I'd been like,
I'm glad you went there, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm glad you went there because as you've been talking about Milroe, that's what I was thinking. Is like a year ago, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have looked at Jayden Milroe and thought he was an NFL quarterback.
Right, because it was the game he stepped in, for a hurt Bryce Young. You was like, oh man, like they're struggling. And then in 2023, he gets benched for the South Florida game, and they nearly lose that game. And coming out of that game, the rest of the season, he was phenomenal. He was locked in phenomenal. Outplayed Carson Beck in the SEC title game, won the SEC for Alabama, and was doing a great job in the playoffs too. And so you saw the growth from 2022 to 2023, and you saw growth from there to where we are now in 2024. So it shows you the fact that he understood he had to get better. He got better, and where he also thrives is this is why I love Cam Ward and why I love Shedeur Sanders. You kind of can trust these guys with the game on the line. Hey, put the ball in my hands. I'm gonna go down the field and get some points. I'm gonna find a way to make a way. And so with Milroe, you get the Josh Allen comparison for a Brian Daboll, a guy that, still has some rough edges to smooth out with this passing game, like trying to figure out, everything can't be a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, adding touch and knowing when and where to deliver the deep shot or to take the check down or how to throw the check down with some touch. But you can't coach the elite level explosiveness that you're going to get. It's no different than what Anthony Richardson brings to the table with the Colts. And that's why you draft him top 5. This is why if Brian Daboll had his hands on a Jayden Milroe, man, that could be special for the offense.
So let's go to the rest of the class. Most analysts will tell you that those 3 guys that we've already talked about are probably the ones that deserve to be in the first round, that deserve to be in the top 10. Out of the rest of the class, whether they wind up being late round 1 guys or later round 1 guys or day 2 guys or whatever, out of the rest of the class, who do you really like? Who do you think, can be an NFL player?
It's if we're talking later in the quarterback class, there's some guys. I'm a big Brady Cook fan, out of Missouri. I'd like his toughness. He reminds me a lot of Andy Dalton when he was coming out of TCU. Just a guy that's just like a rugged guy. He can run. He's going to find some openings. I commented about Quinn Ewers' mental toughness because, again, think about how mentally tough you have to be Quinn Ewers. I mean, you had to battle back from injury, which felt like every time, and then you can't have an off game because you already know what's waiting behind you. And so even your own fan base is waiting for you to throw an incomplete pass so they can start screaming Arch Manning. Right?
What do you think of Quinn Ewers' athleticism? Is he athletic enough? Does he move well enough to be an NFL quarterback?
He can be an NFL quarterback, but I compared his game to Kevin Kolb, and that's how I see Quinn Ewers. Slender frame, always seems to be banged up. And so, he can move well enough to where he can, move within the pocket. But in terms of the run threat, that's not his game. He can throw from different arm platform, but his deep ball passing is inconsistent. So to me, he's more of a day 2 type guy. And probably as a QB2 at the NFL level. As Dalton was a solid player, started a lot of games, was a playoff quarterback consistently for Cincinnati. So that's what I see with Brady Cook. With Kevin Kolb, I just don't know if we can trust the health of Quinn Ewers for a full 17-game season.
Right.
Which then you will always have to have your backup quarterback ready to go. But I will say this though, Ed. When I was asked before about the other quarterbacks outside the first round 3 that I like, man, we're seeing situations matter. We touched on that. Now you look around the league, you're like, hey man, like if you're the Giants, let's throw this scenario out here, right? You're picking 2. Whoever's pick 1, whatever, right? But there is a Travis Hunter in this class. And if you feel as though, hey, we can take the special player, but also, man, I can work with Malik Willis. How about we call Pittsburgh and say, which one of these quarterbacks are you keeping? If you keep Russ, that's even better because we want the younger one in Fields. I can work with Fields. Hell, I watch Zach Wilson work with Sean Payton. He's young enough, athletic enough. We can get something out of him too.
I've been thinking along that line somewhat with Michael Penix.
That's my point too. Why wouldn't they draft him at 6 anyway? Especially, and not to get on a small tangent, but even when they showed their draft board, there wasn't a red medical flag on Penix. So you could have drafted him this year and had that guy in tow. But that's another one. How, maybe the Falcons drafted him for that specific reason. Like, we got a bargaining chip. Somebody's going to need a quarterback, and we got one. So that's a great observation by you. So, yeah, that way you can kind of have your cake and eat it too if you're the Giants. So you don't have to reach for a quarterback outside of the first round. You can explore those other options. Sam Darnold may come available. And if he continues to play, he's starting to kind of regress a little bit. So he may be out of the question. But man, Malik Willis shown what he can do in a better situation. Fields has shown that. Zach
You
Wilson has
know,
shown that.
and then if you take that path, there's also the idea of, the day two guy, whether it's some of the guys you mentioned or Jackson Dart, or, and I don't know what you think of Dart, and I haven't really studied him. And then there's the rapidly falling off the cliff Carson Beck. But
Stay away from Beck, man.
yeah, it's not only the interceptions that bother me with Beck, it's the deer in the headlights look on it in his eyes sometimes, and it's the fact that for so many years people have complained about Daniel Jones. Even when he sees it and throws it, the ball's not necessarily placed in a spot where it makes it easy for the receiver. And I see a lot, or where the guy can run with the ball. And I've had all kinds of arguments with people about the interception that Daniel Jones threw that in the red zone the other day, the one that
He
bounced
puts
off
it out in
Tyrone
front. If
Tracy's
he
hands.
puts
If he puts it out in front, it's an easy completion.
right,
But my point with that particular play, and you played the running back position, my point with that particular play is the ball, Tyrone Tracy still had two hands on it, and the defender did nothing to knock the ball away. You know, so the defender was able to make that play because Tyrone Tracy didn't pull it in. It wasn't thrown where it should have been thrown, but it was still a ball that probably should have been caught.
you kind of invited the DB back in the play because you put it behind him. So now the
Sure,
DB and the running back having to
sure,
fight for the ball. So it kind of hit the DB, I mean the linebacker in the chest. He had no choice but to catch it. You know what I'm saying? So it was,
sure.
you know what I'm saying? So it was a
Yeah,
bad,
but it was bad all the way around, but
right.
but the ball's not in the right place, and that's the biggest problem.
Yep. So
But
yeah,
I see that with Beck too.
if you're gonna broach the topic of like, I think it's a good conversation to have. I'm pretty sure the Giants front office is having these conversations. The big domino is like, okay, is Pittsburgh gonna sign Russell Wilson because they're getting him for free this year because the Broncos are paying him? Or are they going to extend Fields? Because if Fields is
Mhm,
available, that's the young option you go and get. I'm pretty sure Green Bay may not come off of Malik Willis based on how often Jordan Love seems to be, banged up. So they
mhm.
kind of want to keep him. And I don't know if Zach Wilson wants to come back out east to New York. So
Yeah, I don't think Zach Wilson in New York is probably a good idea, but I get what you're saying by throwing some of these options out.
mhm,
Um, it's just it's a really interesting deal for the Giants where you could go that way if you the Giants have the number 2 pick right now. And look, I mean, if they have one guy that they're desperate to get out of that top 3,
stay.
they're not only going to have to stay him, they're going to have to trade up and get him, because Jacksonville, if the draft were held today, Jacksonville's got one. They're not taking a quarterback, even
Mhm.
though maybe Trevor Lawrence, isn't actually all that much better than Daniel Jones. They're still not taking a quarterback. But there are a lot of other quarterback needy teams out there. Somebody's going to go get that pick.
Right.
Which means somebody's going to go get that pick, which means you may not have your number one choice. So you might have to trade up anyway. But if you end up sitting at 8, you probably don't have the resources to go make sure you can get Shedeur, or you can make sure you can get, Cam Ward. So you might be better off going that way. You might be better off taking, Mason Graham, defensive tackle, and or whoever the top playmaker is on the board, and figuring out another way to fill quarterback. So it's interesting. A lot of twists and turns to talk about, and we're barely getting started. But here we are again. The Giants are bad again, and halfway through the season, we're talking about the draft instead of playoffs.
Right. And it's
So,
and again, I know everyone attacks Joe Shane's comments the other day. about this is not a 2-8 team. I kind of agree because I think they're closer to Washington than they are to Carolina. You
I
know,
I would agree with that, and as I said, I think they're not a great team, but they're not a team that should end up. They're going to wind up winning 3 or 4 games probably,
hmm
but they're better than that. I think with better, I believe with better quarterback play. And I've been a Daniel Jones. I've not a Daniel Jones fan per se, but I have supported for a while. Just looking at the choices that the Giants have had, I've said, well, did they really have a choice but to move on from him in this particular year? Did they really have a choice to move on in that particular year? So the situation has been that because he was there, he was the best choice they had in a lot of those cases, at least in my mind. But I look at this year and I think there's probably 3 games that they win if the quarterback does what the quarterback should do. So
I,
that's 5-5.
I totally agree. And this team could be with better quarterback play. We're probably talking about the 6 or 7 seed contention.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, we're not because this is where we are. Oh, forgot to mention. How about you call Bryce Young and the Panthers too? That's another option if they want to. They're moving on from Bryce Young. If they decided that yet, if not, then
Yeah.
hey,
I'm
it's
not
worth
as
a phone
e-
call.
despite I'm not as big a Bryce Young fan as I am maybe some of these other guys.
hmm
Um, Simply based on size and tools and things like that. But as I think I've written this and said it before, if Brian Daboll and Joe Shane like it and think they can work with it, then sure, you pick up the phone and if Carolina's going to draft a quarterback, sure, you pick up the phone and see if and see if they're willing to move on.
Because I don't think he just forgot how to play football. You know what I mean? Like with how efficient and decisive he was as a prospect. There's no way you just but this is a situation we've been talking about where situations kind of
Situation
matter.
matters so much.
Yep.
Situation, coaching staff, all of that matters so much. And you're right. You said it earlier with a lot of these recycled guys, you're seeing them do fairly well. You know, maybe not as well as they might have done had they had a clean start to their NFL careers, but you're seeing that there's ability there.
You're seeing them win games, which is important. As long as you
Hmm.
come out on top, things are working. Because again, I've always said this and felt this sentiment where we shouldn't overvalue the quarterback. Your quarterback should be a piece of the puzzle, not the puzzle. Like you should be able to win games with your quarterback and not try to say we need this to win games. But when you don't have one that's
Right.
comparable, you see it.
Hmm.
So even if you get, let's say how Green Bay did with Malik Willis, you're not saying Malik Willis is on the same par as Patrick Mahomes, but within the structure of a team, he's doing his part. This guy
Right.
is doing his part, and we're winning as a team.
Right.
And that's what you want.
Right. And what you've seen, I think, on a few occasions this year is you've seen the quarterback not do his part.
Bingo. There,
Hmm.
point.
Yep.
Great point.
All right, Em. I think that's a good spot for us to call it a day. So let's do that. Thank you as always for the insight, and I'm sure that we'll do this again. I'm sure that you're beginning to plan your travel itinerary for January and
You
and
already
going
know.
forward. Yep, I'm sure. I don't know. You got a list of the outfits you're going to bring and all that stuff yet?
Well, when I'm on the road, it's all sweats and stuff like this because that's in my element. I can be comfortable. I ain't have to be
Mhm.
suited up on the road.
There you go. All right. So maybe that makes packing just a little bit easier.
Very much easier, like a breeze.
All right. And thank you very, very much. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.